Cecelia Gilbreath comes to us tonight. She's kind of a newbie into genealogy. She's only been doing this the last couple of years, and I think probably her job kind of helped her get interested in this. Her job involves a lot of history and digging, and what better skills for a genealogist than to digging into people's history and being kind of a snoopy nose looking into family stuff, scandals and things. So she just fit right in. We're glad to have her into the genealogy world. She was born and raised in Fort Worth. She went to Morningside Daggett and Morningside Junior High and graduated from Pascal High School. And she's married to a Fort Worth firefighter for 51 years. They have 2 children and 2 grandsons. She has been an assistant vice president of Radican Title Company, and she's worked for Commerce Title and Alamo Title. So she comes to us with a vast, many years amount of experience and knowledge. She's also gotten into quilting and gardening and traveling. And boy, gardening and traveling goes right along with genealogy too. So she has been a volunteer, and this is what kind of led her to us tonight. She's been a volunteer with Tarrant County Archives. She's also gotten into charity quilting and at her church, Legacy Church of Christ, active in the Central Meadowbrook Neighborhood Association. She's been active with the Retired Fort Worth Firefighters Association, and I wanted her to meet Rob tonight with the loud bang back there. He's into firefighting. And a member of the Retiree Health Benefits Committee for the City of Fort Worth. So I think we're going to have a really good group tonight. I'm afraid, I was sort of afraid the rain might keep people away, or maybe the Republican convention, but I'm glad you people came out tonight in Fort Go, and we're ready for Mrs. Gilbreath.
Good evening. I'm so delighted to be here and speak to you about my knowledge of what you might find in the deed records. I'm not an attorney, ergo everything I tell you this evening is from a layperson's knowledge acquired while working at the title company department in the examination department. Nor do I consider myself a real genealogist, as I kind of look at Dr. Gates and the PBS series and you people that have been doing this for years as true genealogists. I imagine all of you have much more time and experience in this wonderful trip back in time. I just hope I can help you through my knowledge of the property title search and the unexpected information that you can find. Any person who loves history, likes all their ducks in a row, knows that the weakest link in a chain will eventually break and cause problems, would love the title industry. My ingress into the title industry was like magic. Just like a jigsaw puzzle, everything had to fit. A chain of title, each link interlocked with the prior link. That is how title to a property progresses in ownership. It can come down through a patent, through a state grant, a deed of conveyance, a purchase, foreclosure, a tax sale. It can come through inheritance via a will. And Texas is very unique in their property laws because Texas was a republic before it became a state of the United States. Therefore, unlike other states, Texas retained all their public lands, all their school lands, and minerals. That is why I'm sure you've heard the expression before, you own heaven to hell. In Texas, you own everything above the property and everything below the property when you buy a piece of property, unless those rights have been reserved by a prior owner. If you'll notice all these walkways across the streets in downtown Fort Worth, somebody had to get a title policy to cross over those streets because the city of Fort Worth owned that airspace above it. So we really mean you own heaven to hell. Not sure how far heaven goes up that you own, but that's what it is in Texas. Another quirk is that a deed of conveyance can transfer title if delivery is made but not recorded. We found this in lawsuits still going on in several large land title disputes in the Panhandle and South Texas. A deed is delivered, put into a trunk, and turns up years later when ownership of a parcel of land is under dispute. I think many were settled with a shootout At least some of the legends in Texas say that. And Texas is famous, or perhaps infamous, on the tales relating to the King Ranch and the 4-6 Ranch up in the Panhandle. I also recall an examination we did on the Coyote Ranch down in South Texas, wherein Spanish land treaties were a part of the title evidence, and whether the Rio Grande River or the Nueces River was the boundary. Now, we had to go back to some treaties, and that's going a long way to determine title to the land. The result was that international treaties override land grants, which dictated the Nueces River, and so the boundary was reaffirmed to be the Rio Grande River, thereby giving clear title to the thousands of acres in the dispute back to Texas and the Coyote Ranch, and giving a chain of title back to the Spanish land grant. Family cemeteries set aside on those properties must always be accessible by living family members. I'm sure many of you have read about disputes over long forgotten cemeteries until someone wants to develop the land and then the heirs just come out of the woodwork. But that's sacred ground, so Texas does uphold those rights. However, title and the documents that back them up can be a wealth of information to the genealogist. Many times an affidavit of heirship must be obtained wherein someone claiming to know the true facts of a family will swear that they know the dates of marriages, births, other relationships. Some are filed in the public records, and some may only be filed in the probate records via the administration of a will of an estate. Another problem can arise in title was prior to women having any rights. A single woman could buy property and sell property. A married woman could buy property, but not sell it without her husband's consent and signature. One of the worst title problems I encountered personally was my husband's family. His grandmother's brother had contracted to have lightning rods put upon his house, and they were. However, he decided that they cost way too much, so he quit paying for them and they were going to foreclose on his home. So quickly, he deeded his property to his sister in love and affection. After everything settled down, the sister deeded the property back to him without her husband's signature. Not a valid deed of conveyance in Texas at that time. Eventually, the land was to be sold, but could not be with this cloud of title. This caused lawsuits by family members since the grandmother and her husband are now dead. The brother and his wife were dead. And back in that day and age, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, everyone had large families to work the farm. So by the time it was done and the lawsuits were filed, there were over 200 quitclaim deeds had to be obtained and filed. Thank goodness women now have rights to buy and sell property, but only if it is their sole and separate property. Yet the beauty of all of that was we now had all the names of all of the children, their spouses, and perhaps even grandchildren, and all the relationships because of the quitclaim deeds. And most important, where they were currently living because of the notarization of the deeds. We now knew what state they lived in, probably what city they lived in. And that is just a boon to many genealogists that can't find cousins, aunts, uncles, whatever. So that was an unexpected thing that happened. Some of the most unexpected genealogy finds can be found in deeds of conveyance, as I recently learned myself. My grandmother was an orphan raised in the Masonic home here in Fort Worth along with her 3 siblings. When probate records on the parents' estate were obtained from the probate court in Hardeman County, I saw property in Clinton County, Iowa, listed on the inventory. I emailed the Clinton County recorder. They're not county clerks up there, I found out they're recorders. Asking for any information, document, whatever, that could be found. And lo and behold, I received a deed that my grandparents bought, great-grandparents bought this property. It was a contract for deed, which is the way most property was conveyed back then. You'll notice along the side it says he gave $1,000 for this property in 1900, but if you look down at the bottom, you'll see that he didn't pay for it until 1903 when it was finally recorded. It says it was recorded in 1903, March of 1903, but he bought it in October of 1900. So I got the deed. Next, and you'll notice also that it gives the full property. This is real important later on. So next I asked for a deed of sale of the same property that would show my great-grandparents as the sellers. I was expecting to get the sale of this property. I was totally surprised to receive a deed on my great-great-grandparents. Property we did not even know she owned, and it states on the deed, which we don't have a copy of that her husband was George D. Johnson. I nearly fell over. I had been looking for verification forever that George and Sarah owned property in Iowa somewhere before George went off to Arizona to find his fortune and left his wife and kids. And there it was, right there in that deed. And why did I get this deed? Because Sarah was selling the property, and because George didn't leave a will, and he was dead, all the children also inherited as part of that. So all the children had to sign the deed so that the new buyers could get a clear title to that property along with Sarah's new husband. So now we found out something I was totally not expecting to find, and verification that old George did live and he and Sarah owned some property up in Iowa. However, I was still looking for the deed that my grandparents' property in Clinton County, Iowa. But it hadn't been found. So I wrote them back, and eventually I went up to Hardeman County and got the probate records for the children's guardianship. And lo and behold, found out that this property that my grandfather had bought, great-grandfather had bought in 1900, was a part of the children's estate, and he rented it out, and it brought in money for the children's estate all through the years until the last child aged out of the Masonic home. So once I found that out, I eventually got the second deed that we have, which was a sale of the property, which was signed by all of the children, my grandmother and her 3 siblings. And I will have to say that my mother and I just laughed and laughed when we saw this, because her mother, my grandmother, is listed in this deed as being divorced. I mean, as being a widow when she was actually divorced, and we just laughed about that. So that's another story. We're not sure that title was good, but at that time. Anyway, from the first deed we find that the property that was owned by my great-grandfather up in Iowa, they were wealthy people. We didn't know that. And from the property description, I contacted the Historical Society up there and told them I was looking, got a plat of the property, got a plat of the city where they were in Comanche. Isn't that funny? Comanche County, Comanche City, Iowa, right on the Mississippi River. They owned the 2 city blocks plus a house place. So they were rather wealthy, as their probate shows later on in Hardeman County. But you can see from old deeds that you can find out a wealth of information along with some little white lies sometimes. My last bit of help is the most important thing I ever learned in the title business, told to me by an old attorney that I work for. And he'd been examining titles, I think, since the Garden of Eden. He was so old. He told me that if I just remember 2 things, and this is real important, I would never have any trouble understanding any documents that I read. And here's the bit of wisdom. The OR does it, and the EE gets it. Like grantor, grantee, trustor, trustee, assignor, assignee, devisor, devisee. This one does it, that one gets it. Many title and abstract companies will, for a fee, perform a title search on your property. You don't even have to know the exact property because they can search by the grantor-grantee. And most of the older companies have card files, which is just a brief description of every document that was ever filed in that particular county. And it's filed by volume and page. It'll give you some information, who was the grantor, who was the grantee, what it was about. And from that, you can either look at the card and you may determine that you want a copy of that document and so you can get the volume and page and go down to the courthouse without having to search through all their records. Or sometimes the title companies have all of these documents on microfilm or microfiche, and they will sell you a document if you find one that you want. I have found in my searching, and smaller counties are much easier to obtain information from the courthouse. I'll tell you, it's like visiting your long-lost cousin. You're catching up on all of the goings-on that's been going on, and they are so helpful, and they'll help you find stuff, give you information that you didn't even know you wanted until they told you. You know, well, you need to check with Miss So-and-so over here. Now, here's her phone number, and she knows this and that and the other. And, oh, all those records of that attorney, now they're over at so-and-so's. Do you know them? Well, no, but what's their phone number? So you find out a lot of information from smaller title companies, and they're very helpful. Now the larger, from the smaller courthouses. Now the larger courthouses, like Tarrant County, for instance, they'll help you, but they're not real free with their information. They'll just show you where to go and where to get the film and how to run the machine, and that's it. You know, you're on your own. Another really good source of information is the appraisal district records, because most of these, not only in Texas, but all over the United States, are now on the internet. And you can search for property by street name, by owner name, a former owner name. If you know the former owner, but you know the property's been sold, you can search by that. The biggest problem you run into is not knowing the married name of women. But I'll tell you, if you can ever find a male relative, the records on the appraisal districts will usually always give you a mailing address if it's different from the property address. And then, of course, many of you know, then you go to the internet and you look up the white pages or the yellow pages, and you can find their phone number. And that's how recently that we reconnected with some cousins that we had lost track of down in the San Antonio area, because I found that people, from my generation, they just don't move around a lot from where they were raised. So I just started looking at all those little counties down there, and bingo, when I hit one of them, I'm saying, well, that's all I need, because I can get in touch with that one, and that one will get in touch with all the others. And we spent, earlier this year, my mother and sister and all of us, we all got together at my daughter's house down in Austin and had a reunion of these cousins that we had lost track of for many years. So I hope, armed with this information, that you will begin to look at the deed records as another source of finding out family information in your genealogy search. And of course, a lot of times when you read these documents, you'll get so involved in reading them that it takes you forever to get where you're going, because they get so interesting sometimes, And I've been volunteering at the Tarrant County Archives, and I just finished a database for the probate records that we had donated. And it took me forever to get through them, because I just kept reading them, and I'd come across something and I'd read it. So you're going to find that in your search through the deed records, that you also will find some information, some little white lies, some things you didn't know. Oh, that was his first wife, didn't know he was married. Affidavits of heirship giving, a lot of times they'll give adopted children that you didn't even know you had. And next month I'm going to talk about some of my mother's family that, out of the probate records, I found some information and found out that we had cousins and 6 other children in my grandmother's family that we never knew existed. But I was able to contact one of them after I found that information out. But that's for next month, and what you can find in the probate records. So that's all I have on deed records, but I think that it is a wonderful source of information for you. And then if you can find out the property descriptions, you can always get a copy of the plats, see exactly where the property was. The property in Iowa that my great-grandparents owned was 2 blocks off the Mississippi River. I'm often wondering, you know, when they came to Texas, did they come down the river? Did they go by the train? Because they live right across from the train tracks. You know, how did they get here? We'll never know, because they died of typhoid fever 1905, and the mother died 3 months later in 1906. So we'll never know, because there's no history for those children other than, you know, what they knew at the Masonic home. So do you have any questions?
Is there, there's so many terms that mean the same thing. Is there any rhyme or reason?
Okay, grantor, grantee is usually in a deed. Trustor, trustee is usually your deed of trust, where you've borrowed the money and you're giving you sign over to the trustee the rights to your property if you don't pay your mortgage. The assignor or assignee is usually done by a banking firm, but it's or it could be, and now that we have all these mineral leases, you're assigning your lease, or you're assigning your rights, or you're assigning your loan. And that, folks, is how we got into the problem that we're in the United States today, is all these assigned loans that were worth nothing. The devisor, devisee is usually in your will. You're devising, somebody is writing a will and they're devising or giving something to someone else.
Thank you. I've never had that all.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I was up in Grayson County and trying to locate ancestors' property in Grayson, and I went to a title company and they said that they would have to charge me per hour.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's customary? Or is there any way you can do that yourself? Or
You can search in
do
the,
it myself?
now, was that the county or was that a title company?
A title company?
Yeah, a title company charges you to come and look, but usually if you're looking yourself, you pretty well know what land you're going through, and there's only going to be, you know, so many cards in the card file that's of that land, you know, that you're going to find. The courthouse doesn't charge you to go through their records, but they charge you for the copies that you get.
Right, so I would have to go back and see who it was sold to.
Right. Mm-hmm. But if you know about when it is, then you don't have to go through all of these records unless you're wanting to see where did it start out as a law, you know, was it a state grant and then come down, or did you just want what was your family's, you know, where your family first took title to it?
Wouldn't that be an abstract out of the courthouse?
You can get an abstract. Most abstracts cost a lot now because, you know, they don't want to do abstracts. They just want to do a little brief title search.
Well, I have a cousin who's a landman, and we got ours back to 1837.
Right. I have some abstracts of some property that I have purchased. That used to be the way they did it until title insurance came into being, and that took that away, because an abstract is an actual copy of everything that was filed on that property. You get an actual copy or reproduction or whatever of all of the documents that were filed on that piece of property up to the point in time that you're looking for. But most of your title companies, even in small counties, you know, if you just want a title search, yes, they're going to charge you for it.
Well, this was in Nacogdoches County, and it is up to date.
That's the way they make money. Also,
He knows what he's doing, too.
that's right, and he can do it quickly. But I was up in Hardeman County, and they told me, well, we'll let you come up here and go through our records for, I think it was $89.50 an hour. I'm going, well, it shouldn't take very much, because there's not much filed on the property I want to look for. You know, it's been held by the same family for hundreds of years, so it won't take me very long to go through the cards on that survey that's up there. But I need to go back up there. Any other questions?
Could you run back through those and just maybe kind of redefine so we'll...
Okay. The patent or the state grant. Usually you're going to find these way back when Texas first became a state, and the soldiers that fought, you know, they were given a land grant or a state grant or a piece of land. Stephen Foster's group that came in, you know, they got land patents on certain acreage of land and they sold it. The deed of conveyance is between me and you. You know, we're selling our house, you're buying my house. That's a deed of conveyance by purchase, deed of sale. A foreclosure, we all know what that is because we've had plenty of them, you know. Somebody forecloses because you didn't pay your mortgage and they sell it on the courthouse steps. And if you know, you sell it on the courthouse steps, I believe it's first Tuesday of every month. And they're published, you know, what's going to be sold. Somebody can get you that list, what's going to be sold, or you can go down to the courthouse and see what's going to be sold. The tax sale is they didn't pay their taxes. Now, when I first started out in the title industry, people didn't really like to buy for a tax sale because the law in Texas was that the owner that didn't pay his taxes and they sold his land, he had 2 years to redeem it. So you could buy that property at a tax sale on the courthouse steps. And you could put all this work into it, you know, and plant your corn and all this kind of stuff. And right before the 2 years was up, the guy comes back and says, well, no, this looks pretty good here. You've done a really good job. I believe I'm going to reclaim this. And all he has to do is reclaim it, but he has to pay you what you've put into it, you know, so your crops or something, which is not a lot of money, but he didn't have to pay the taxes. He just has to come back and reclaim it and give you what you've put into it. Not the taxes, but what you've put into it. And while I was still in the title industry, that got to be a really, really big problem with some reclamations. And so they changed it to 6 months, that he had 6 months to come back and reclaim the property. But they put it in such a way that it was a lot more stringent, so it didn't make it really lucrative for the former owner to come back and reclaim that property, because not only did he now have to pay the improvements that the new owner had made, but he had to give him some damages and all for reclaiming his property, so it didn't make it. And then the inheritance, of course, is you inherit a piece of property from grandma, grandpa, mother, father, whatever. You get that property in the will. So that's what that is. Affidavit of heirship, again, sometimes these are called affidavit of heirships. They could be called an affidavit of family history. They could be called an affidavit of facts. But they're by somebody that claims that they know the true facts of this family's history. They know when mom and dad were married. They know what date it was. They know they had these kids, that they only had these kids, that they were only married one time. Whatever it is, they claim to know. And they are also a tremendous wealth of information, not only because they give dates, but because they often will tell you if one of them had been married before, if there were any adopted children, if there were any children that were born to this family that passed away, that died in infancy that nobody knew about. They never knew. Well, we never knew they had any other children. That's what you will find oftentimes in an affidavit of heirship.
Isn't that the same type of instrument that, say for instance, my mother did not have a birth certificate, so therefore she got a delayed birth certificate. But one of her older brothers had to declare that he knew. Is that the same thing as an affidavit of?
Yeah. Well, it's an affidavit of facts that they know that, which is funny because we have a birth certificate for my grandmother that was sworn to by her brother that's just older than her, that was just 2 years old when she was born, 2 or 2.5 years old. I don't know how in the world he could swear that, but he did. You know, doesn't have to. You know, it's just somebody that's swearing that they know that you were born. And of course, many times back then, children did not have birth certificates that were recorded at the by the doctor.
In the state archives, you know, there's that one big room that has birth certificates and delayed birth certificates.
Yeah, and delayed birth certificates, right. And some of them don't have names on them either. So, the quitclaim deed is just what it says. I quit claim to this property. You know, I don't want it. You know, it's a cousin or something, but somebody died without a will, and so they have to go through all these lines of descent or ascent, and so they're saying, I quit claim title to this property. I don't want it, I'm quit claiming it. And so that's what that is. A warranty deed.
Sometimes companies won't take a quick claim deed when you're trying to sell or buy stuff. If they find you've got a quick claim deed, then they will question it.
Yeah, quit claim deeds don't really hold much water anymore. They want a real deed, that you're deeding your portion to them. A warranty deed is what most of us are familiar with. It's a warranty deed that I'm warranting that I own this property. I'm selling it to you. Some title company is doing the examination, and you get a clear chain of title on it and a title policy. And that's what nearly everything in Texas is done that way now. Even if you don't go to a title company and you go to an attorney, Texas says, well, they have to be associated with some title company that'll issue the policy. So it doesn't matter whether you go through a title company or a attorney, you're still going to get a title policy from somebody, because nobody's going to do abstracts. They want that title insurance behind their title to guarantee it, so that if taxes didn't get paid somewhere, or somebody turns up, later on and says, oh, well, y'all forgot about me. I was the long lost brother that went off and decided to join a commune out here, and everybody lost track of me. But now I've come back to claim my inheritance, and somebody forgot about that. Well, that's what the title company protects you from, those kind of things happening. And then a trust deed, we call them a lien of mortgage or a deed of trust. That's your mortgage. That's your paper. Now, the deed of trust itself just sets out all the terms. The note is the big thing. The note, whoever has the note, owns the loan. And they don't ever record that note. They only record the deed of trust that sets out all the terms of it, and then the mortgage company is supposed to hold this note. And there again, that's what got us into all this trouble, because nobody could find all the notes when they assigned all these mortgages and packaged them up and sold them, and overseas and everything. Nobody knows the notes. Nobody knows who owns them. And we had that problem back in the early or late 80s, early 90s, when all the banks went belly up. And we had all these pretend banks roaming around and people taking over banks. Nobody knew who has the note. Who really owns this? Who do we pay off? Nobody knew who to pay off. But those are the kind of things that can happen in land titles. But the most important things that you're going to find are going to be in your deed, your warranty deeds, your affidavits of heirship, perhaps your quitclaim deeds. If, like my husband's family, we had to get all these heirs to quit claiming property so that they could sell it. Those are the ones where you're going to find your ancestors, the people that did it, the people that you're looking for. That's where you're going to find that information. Any other questions?
You said you volunteered over at the archives. I have a question that relates to this. How deep do the mineral leases, the guys doing the mineral leases, actually go back on? I'm curious about that.
Well, Dawn, who is the archivist over there, is here tonight, and I'm going to let her answer that question, because I know that I've seen a lot of landmen down there.
Yeah, I know. I've been over there. They crowd you out.
Well, they go back to the founding of the county, 1850, and one reason, I estimated one time, and I told the county administrator, we say Chesapeake, probably $100,000 a year, the archives, and of course they don't give that to us, but they just come in there and use the archives for free, and they take it back to the founding of the county. There have been some very interesting cases, because I ask the landmen pretty often, I say, what do you do when you find the problem in the chain that Cecelia was talking about?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
And they said they just report it to the lawyers and let the lawyers deal with it. But there was one very recently where they came in and they said that it was pretty clear that Trinity Park in Fort Worth, part of it was still owned by the Edwards family, if you took it back far enough. And so I said, well, what did the Edwards family do? Take back part of Trinity Park? And they said, no, the Edwards family's already agreed to sign it back over to the city. Now, I assume there would be some tax advantage, going on there, but there almost every landman I've talked to has had a case, at least one case, and probably several, where this chain is incomplete. Also in Tarrant County, we had a fire, as you all may know, in 1876, March of 1876. So everything before that, what you can see in the abstract that Cecilia's talking about, where they had to go back and people attested, okay, I know that you own that farm. And so you see the attestations in there for that ownership. And I am really curious to know if there might have been some land advantage to somebody when that courthouse got fired. Because I'm from South Texas, and there are a number of courthouse fires in South and Central Texas where there was either an election or a big land grab right after the courthouse burned. And so I'm just still a little, everyone I know that I talk to says that there was nothing, it was just a fire.
Yeah.
But if you all come across anything, I'd love to hear from you. If I come across something, you will be hearing from me.
Did you say 1880?
1876.
Okay.
And the curious thing about that is exactly the year that the railroad came in. And so what happened to all land prices when the railroad came in?
Did TXO also take all theirs back to 1876?
Oh, they take it back to the founding of the county, which is 1850.
50, okay. Thank you.
But the leasing agents, the leasing landmen, I don't think they go back and do all that stuff. Chesapeake ends up doing it when they do what do you call it? The distribution, division order is when they really go back and get to find out for sure that the first instance, they're not going to pay, that's who they're going to pay, is the division order.
Well, all I know is the people that come, I know not landmen, but all I know is people that come into the archives, they're always taking it back to the founding of the county. And even though nothing could be done, but I'm sorry.
Did that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
One more thing. Do title companies ever hire genealogists at all to dig into the back family stuff, or they just do it themselves? I mean, just.
I really don't know.
Yes, I've had it, been approached by a genealogist who was trying to figure out for a title company who really owned the land,
We're trying to do that too in our family. We know who owned the land and who took the land and pretty much how it got taken. But my cousin, when he went up there to get just made a trip, and he brought me some stuff, and I said, well, no wonder they took the land. There's 3 working oil wells on it. Of course they took it away from these 4 orphan children. So, but
The landman at these oil companies is a good source, because when they approached me and asked me some questions, and I answered the questions, and then he said something, and I said, well, what do you know about him? He said, oh, I have the affidavit of heirship, and it was my great-great-grandfather's, listing his children, his married daughters' names, everything.
see, that's why those affidavits are so important, that you're not going to find them on Ancestry.com. You're only going to find them in either the probate records or the public records.
The affidavit of airships are not filed in the probate office either. They're filed in the county clerk's level.
It depends on where they were. They can be filed at the county clerk's level. However, if they were only obtained in a probate so that a judge could, render this probate, you're going to find them in the probate records.
You're right there. What I was getting at is, it's not like a will. You can't go to the probate office and be assured you're going to get the affidavit of heirship. Because it's usually for somebody that's intestate and they don't even probate it. They just
That's right.
divide it up, and so then that heirship affidavit is going to be in the
So where do you go to
county
look for
clerk.
it?
County clerk.
You go to the county clerk's office when, and this usually happens when a person has died without a will. I know when my father passed away, he died without a will. I was the only child, and he had remarried. And so she's entitled to live there. It's community property. But a person helped me, and I filed an affidavit of heirship on that property, that I was the child, that I was the only child, yada, yada, yada. And so when that property came up for sale, that affidavit came to light,
Yes.
and the title company said, "Oh, we're sorry, you don't own this land all by yourself. There's a child involved." And so I got a child's portion of the sale of that land. But that's when those things are very important. When there is usually not a will, it was community property, you're not going to move anybody out of the property. You're just going to get your part of the sale of the property at some time by and by and by. If not, then it may be your children, because that still goes down per stirpes, per the bloodline. Okay?
Thank you. Wasn't she wonderful?
Thank you.
We are so excited to have you, and don't forget, she's coming back next month, so come with those questions. Do a little more research. Bring your questions. As she mentioned, she's just been working with Don Youngblood, who just spoke to you, Director of Tarrant County Archives, and she's worked on this project. She's going to tell us about this project next month and talk about all the valuable things in those probate records. I want to thank Dawn for turning me on to Cecelia. We're so glad to have her, and I'm wondering why in the heck she's not a member of Fort Worth Genealogical. Let's get her to join. Come on. Yeah, we'd love to have you.